Hi there! This video will walk you through the Urban Arrow assembly process. That way you can deliver the Urban Arrow family to your clients in perfect condition. Meet Fiets, Urban Arrow's lead designer. He'll guide you throughout this video. Packed in these two boxes is your Urban Arrow family bike. The small box contains the pre-assembled rear frame, steering and brake cables. The big box contains the front frame, foam box, protection tube, fork and wheel, bench, horizontal steering tube, pedals, headset cover plate, elastic damper and tie wraps, bell, bike computer, charger and feeding cable, and the battery. These are the tools you're going to need during assembly. An elevated workbench, a small trestle or box, Allen keys 3, 4, 5, and 6, preferably T-shaped. Set of wrenches, T-wrench cap 10, pedal wrench 15, nippers, Phillips head and regular screwdriver, lubricating grease, and a torque wrench. Okay, let's build this beauty. To be able to install the fork, you must first remove the protection tube and foam box. When removing the front bolts of the protection tube, you want to pay attention to the washers located between the front frame and the protection tube. Remove the protection tube. Wiggle the foam box and remove it from the frame. Grab the fork and dismount the headset. While dismounting the headset, pay close attention to the order of the rings because you'll need to reassemble them in the same order later. Next, you should grease the cups to prevent future seizing. When mounting the fork, note that the compression rings of the headset have a cone-shaped side and a flat side. On the bottom of the fork, the cone-shaped side faces upwards and the orientation of the bearing should correspond with that of the compression ring. After inserting the fork, slide on the bearing, cone-shaped side down, and the compression ring, washer, plastic cap, clamp, and top bolt cap. Eliminate play by turning the top bolt cap until you feel a resistance. Check by pulling back and forth on the fork blades. After fastening the top bolt, you may secure both clamp bolts alternately. When the fork is mounted, you can balance the front frame on the kickstand like this. Moving to the rear frame, you are going to mount the handlebars. Whilst doing this, be careful not to twist any of the cables and especially mind the hydraulic ones. Tighten the top bolt until you feel a resistance and then check the orientation of the steering head. When aligned properly, the base of the black triangle below should be parallel to the handlebar. When you're satisfied with the alignment, tighten the stem bolt to the specified torque. To complete the steering installation, adjust the angle of the stem and the handlebar as desired and tighten the bolt to specification. Lift the rear frame onto the workbench and use a small trestle or something similar to balance it. When properly balanced, you can connect the front and rear frame with 4 M10 bolts. Make sure to use a medium-strength thread lock for these bolts. Tighten the bolts to a torque of 26 Newton-meter. As the Urban Arrow family has two types of brake systems to choose from, we'll highlight both the roller brake and the disc brake in this video. With a roller brake setup, you'll first need to insert the brake cable into the handle. To connect the brake cable to the front wheel, you'll need to guide the entire cable bundle underneath the frame towards the front. Use tie wraps to secure it in place. From the cable bundle, grab the brake cable and connect it to the front brake. If your Urban Arrow has a disc brake, you'll need to route the cable bundle in the same manner as you would with the roller brake type. The only difference here is that the brake cable on the disc brake bike type comes with a pre-assembled caliper. To install the caliper, remove the plastic clip. Then carefully place the caliper over the disc and line up the holes with those in the fork. Connect the caliper to the fork using the M6 bolts and tighten them alternately and verify whether the disc runs freely and is not touching the brake pads. If it is touching the brake pads, readjust the caliper. To complete the installation of the disc brake, reconnect the mudguard stay. You're almost halfway. Good going! To prepare the horizontal steering tube for installation, insert ball joints on both ends, turning clockwise until almost no thread is left. Slide the steering tube into the guide located under the right-hand side of the frame and connect it to the steering head triangle using the outermost hole. Use the washers as follows: 1 on top, 2 in the middle, and 1 on the bottom. Now connect the steering tube to the fork, place the spacers on each side of the ball joint, insert the bolt into the fork, and use the washer underneath the connection lip, between it and the lock nut. Now you can tighten both lock nuts of the steering tube. When installed correctly, the steering tube shouldn't touch the frame when moving the steering from left to right. If it does touch the frame, loosen the lock nuts and readjust the ball joint. The orientation of the ball joint should be horizontal. The cable bundle should be able to move unobstructed. If that is the case, tighten the last tie wrap. To dampen velocity vibrations, you'll need the elastic damper. Unscrew the plastic plate from under the front left corner of the frame. Take the elastic damper, fold it around the steering tube about 8 centimeters away from the bend. Place the other end around the plate, stretch it, and screw it back into its original position. Note that, when moving the steering in both directions, the elastic damper should not touch the steering tube's guide bracket or the frame. Once you get the placement right, apply a tie wrap around the elastic damper to lock it in place. To connect the front light, loosen the front light holder a couple of turns. Slide the cable and connector underneath, make the connection, and remount it. Now it is time to remount the foam box. Put the box in place and nudge it into its final position. Next, you unscrew the M5 bolts from the rear frame. To keep the foam box in position, you'll remount the protection tube. Use Loctite for the M5 bolts that you are going to use to reconnect the protection tube to the rear frame. Fasten these bolts in a cross pattern, as shown, in order to prevent deformation. To complete the installation of the protection tube, on the front of the bike, place the washers between the protection tube and the frame, and use 2 greased M8 bolts to fasten it. Loosening the 4 bolts of the main connection point may help when you find there is too much space between the protection tube and the frame. Don't forget to re-tighten them once you successfully install the protection tube. Now you'll install the rear bench. Position the bench in the bike so that the holes in the legs line up with those in the inside of the frame. Now secure the bench with M6 bolts and washers up to 4 to 6 Newton-meter. To remount the headset cover, loosen the 2 M5 bolts in the front frame a couple of turns so that the headset cover will fit. Adjust the cover to follow the shape of the box and then tighten the bolts. When installing the pedals, make sure you fasten the left and the right one in their proper place. Underneath the bike, slightly loosen all 4 bolts holding the kickstand. This helps the kickstand fold up effortlessly when you lift the rear wheel. To guarantee this Urban Arrow family leaves your shop in perfect condition, you ought to perform these final checks before delivery. Brake tension for roller brake bikes. For disc brake bikes, verify that both front and rear discs run free from the brake pads. Shifter cable free play should be around 1 mm. Spoke tension. Speed sensor alignment. Check the cable routing going to the back wheel and verify that the cable isn't touching the wheel. Bicycle lock. Chain tension. While placing the battery, you should hear a click to ensure that the battery is locked in place. To unlock, turn the key and pull the battery backwards. Now you can place it in the charger so your client can leave your store on his new bike. Bike computer and its functions. Lights. Tire pressure. Mudguard connection. Finally, make sure all nuts and bolts around the bike are securely fastened. And that is your brand new Urban Arrow family bike. Assembled and ready to roll.